Okay, I'm going to showcase what the outcome of this GitHub issue is, which is trying to make a consistent theme across operating systems, terminals, and tools. And first thing I'm going to do is just show what the output and the outcome is, what it looks like, and then I'll dive into a little bit of the implementation. It's not entirely clean, but at least you'll see how much complexity is required to get what I have right now. So first off, VS Code. This is what it looks like. It's following my Windows theme. So if I go to Window and just say dark, I don't know the keyboard shortcut for this yet. I'll probably make one. But you can see there, it live switches between these two preferred themes. So there's a preferred dark theme and a preferred light theme. And I have this section here. So this is sort of skipping into implementation, but you can see that I have my VS Code settings JSON in this repository. We'll dive into that repository in a moment. So that's how I'm getting the font. So I'm choosing JetBrains Mono from Nerd Fonts. It seems good enough. I respect the JetBrains brand, so that's I guess the primary motivator for that is just I like JetBrains. I've been using them most of my career. And I'm still on the fence about Solarized as the themes. But this is the VS Code side of things. So far, so good. If I switch back to light, boom. And now I will show my terminal. So I'm using Alacrity. You see here that it is also following the light theme. It's not following Windows though, and I'll show that in a moment. But let's go into a file so you can see what it looks like. I can open up the README, and here's the README. As you can see, the NeoVim configuration is also following the same theme, and that is intentional. And if I do git log-p, you'll also see that Delta, which is the diff tool that I'm on the fence about, is also following the theme. Now let's go back to the dark theme. And here you'll see that, okay, Alacrity didn't follow suit. That's because it's not following the operating system theme. That's fine. But I can do night, and I can switch themes like that. You can see that the Delta stuff didn't change, but now if I do Delta, now Delta is also following the theme. And if I go into the README, or if I go into Vim, and you can see that it's also following the theme. And it's also the same font as well as VS Code. It's the JetBrains Mono Nerd font, and it's also font size 16, which is good for my old man eyes. Now that's how it looks and feels. Let's dive into how was this achieved. So first off, let's take a look at how all the fonts are determined. And so I think for that, it might just be easiest to do. These are all the files where nerd font is mentioned. So an important one are the Alacrity config files. So I have an Alacrity config file for macOS, and I have one for Windows. I would like to look at consolidating that, but one thing I found is that the JetBrains Mono font name is different in macOS than it is on Windows. How do I obtain the fonts? So in macOS, I'm using Brew, and on Windows, I'm using Chocolatey. And so if we go to here and we look at box starter, and so here's the different fonts that I've installed. I'm not using them all, but I want them available in case I'm feeling like a change for the day. And of course, it's in the VS Code settings here. Yeah, that's it for how I've obtained the fonts and how I'm selecting the fonts. maybe it's worth taking a look at the Alacrity config. So this is the Alacrity config for on my Windows setup. So specifying the font size and specifying the font. Some stuff in order to make stuff work. This is for Alt F and Alt B to move forward and backwards on the terminal on Alacrity. Tangential to what we're talking about now. Now something is interesting is that Alacrity is running in Windows, but this shell on the right is WSL. And it's running Jammy Jellyfish. Now, of course, I don't have like X windows here, so that configuration of the Alacrity stuff needs to happen in Windows. And it's a little bit, I will admit that it's a hack. So let's go into how that's configured. So I'm using a tool called Alacrity Color Scheme. And so here you can see how, actually good, all of it fits right here. So those day and night functions do a couple things. So one is I use the Alacrity Color Scheme to change the scheme. That modifies that Alacrity YAML file. So I'm not symlinking it, I've just copied it over. So what we'll see in Alacrity, so you can see that the color scheme has added this colors section to the file, and Alacrity live loads that. But that file lived on my Linux file system. So in order to get Windows to recognize those changes, I copy the file from here and I just put it into the known config location for Alacrity. This is well documented in the Alacrity README, which was nice. And with WSL, you always have the Windows mount points available to you. What else is interesting here? Oh yeah, and then the Vim scheme. So, and I'll open that up on the left because that might make that easier. Oh, don't show, please. Although syntax would be nice here. Here's what's going on here. So in my init.vim, I look for this vim rc background file, which helps it specify whether or not it should be a light or a dark background. A bit of a hack, but it does allow the whole terminal thing to follow the color scheme. And I'm not using any ZSH color scheme stuff. I'm not using Oh My ZSH. This is, I have to deal with themes in 3 levels: Alacrity, NeoVim, and Delta. And we'll get to Delta now, because that's also a bit of a hack. Where is it? I think it's called, yeah. So whenever I run Delta, probably worth going into, where is it? My git config. So I'm using Delta as the pager, and I'm using it as this wrapped command. And so this wrapped Delta calls out to the Alacrity color scheme to figure out what the existing scheme is. And if it's dark, we specify Delta dark. And if it's light, we specify Delta light with, of course, the solarized themes. This alone is probably making me want to ditch Delta or figure out how Delta can be smart in reading the operating system theme. But of course, this is running in the WSL instance, so I don't know if it's going to be WSL aware and know that it can call PowerShell or whatever. I actually don't know what the command is, but anyways, it's a little bit of a hack in order to make sure that my Delta follows the terminal theme. Now, I'm not showing macOS, but essentially everything on the right-hand side here is the same. I'm using Alacrity with a similar configuration, and same thing with the same Delta command, etc. Only thing that's different there is, well, on macOS I don't use VS Code. I don't do a lot of coding on macOS. My primary automation is for making sure my Terraform stuff works, or like I just run commands and edit a file occasionally on macOS, whereas I tend to, I don't do a lot of programming on Windows, but I intend to do more, and it's about time I got a cozy setup that I enjoy using. And I think this is good enough. And so now I can go switch back to day, and that switches. And if I go, I tend to prefer day or light modes, just because I don't do a lot of coding or anything at night. It's during the day. But I am not 100% sure about this solarized light theme. I feel like I need a little bit more contrast. And I think I can also change the font size a bit. As for the implementation stuff, so one thing that's interesting, if I go into here and change this to let's change this to 15, you'll actually see that actually modified my file, which is sort of cool. I can even modify the file, and VS Code will pick it up. So I can make it 18, and it auto detects, which is pretty snifty. Anyways, that's it for the showcase of how I've chosen or implemented the usage of these fonts and color schemes, and how to switch between them, how to make things consistent between the operating system, the text editor like VS Code, and the terminal, and my NeoVim. It's a little bit complicated, I would say, I admit, and I think I want to make things maybe read from the operating system theme a bit more, but at the same time I do like being able to just switch things manually rather than having everything coupled to that one configuration. All right, I'm going to call, this thing done. I've made notes about the font selections and where to look things up and how to find what the packages are called. As my buddy Luis mentioned, I could have tried out Hack. I just felt like I already had enough fonts, but Hack does look good. But it wasn't 10 times better than the ones that I was looking at to make to add it to the list. I did mention that ASDF was causing some fuss, but I'll probably do that in another video. And yeah, I'm gonna finish the recording and upload this to YouTube and call it done.